are being recorded for the convenience of those unable to attend this video conference. A recording and captioning will be posted to the BERS YouTube channel following the meeting. Alex, can you please call roll?
Peter Calandrella.
I am present.
Thank you. Isaac Carmignani.
Present.
Thank you. Janelle Chacon.
Present.
Thank you. April Chapman.
Present.
Very striking head rigid.
Thank you. Deborah Dillingham.
Present.
Thank you. Natalie Green Giles.
Present.
Thank you. Michael Kraft.
Present.
Thank you. Vanessa Leung.
Here.
Thank you. Gary Lennon. No. John Maderick.
Present.
Thank you. Donald Nesbitt. Absent. Lindsay Oates.
Here.
Thank you. Kathy Park Price. Laurie Podvesker. Thomas Shepard.
Present.
Thank you. And Shannon Waite. Okay. We have a quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum. The first order of business is calendar item 1, noting the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Retirement held on July 29th, 2020. The minutes have been previously posted to the board via email and on the SharePoint site. May I have a motion to consider the minutes from the July 29th board meeting? Please raise your hand and state your name.
Peter Calandrella.
The first.
Thomas Shepard.
Thomas Shepard is the second. In the interest of saving time, we are going to do voice votes rather than having Alex call roll for each vote. When I call out all in favor, if you wish to vote in favor of the resolution, please unmute yourself and respond in favor. Similarly, if you wish to oppose or abstain from a particular vote, please unmute yourself and respond accordingly when I call out any opposed or any abstentions. All in favor of approving the minutes of the July 29th board meeting, please indicate your approval.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
abstain.
Okay, who was that?
Lindsay Oates.
Lindsay.
And Vanessa Leung.
Okay, Lindsay and Vanessa are abstaining. The motion carries. Next on the agenda is the executive director's update. Sandy, would you like to share any remarks with us? Is Sandy gone now?
No, just realizing it's not a touch screen. Kept touching it. Folks, a couple of things. National Conference of Public Employee Retirement System Fall Conference is September 29th and 30th. It's a virtual conference. It's focused on actuarial issues. I would encourage you to participate, even partially if you can. Be happy to organize your registration. Just contact me or Karen Wong. Also, the Mayor's Office of Pensions and Investments is going to hold their annual fiduciary training conference on October 19th. It is going to focus on actuarial analysis, and I suspect going to feature Sherry Chan and the actuarial expertise of our own office in New York. Something I would definitely encourage you to do. It's a one-day October 19th event. You'll be seeing invites, calendar invites for this in the future. We're going to be asking for a couple of significant requests today. We are going to make a routine quarterly request for approval to authorize the Bureau of Asset Management to custody and execute for our investment funds. We expect to change that quarterly request in the coming board meeting in December. We are identifying very slow or failures to rebalance our assets. We are seeing monthly performance calculations which are inaccurate, which has caused BAM to not deliver monthly reports anymore across the all the systems. We made an allocation to T. Rowe Price in our fixed income allocations, which has not been funded yet, and it has been nearly 9 months. And we've reviewed, we've gotten a recent report from Baker Tilly, our third-party internal audit consultant, which discusses our relationship with the Bureau of Asset Management and has provided some advice on how to improve our agreement with them. So you're going to expect to hear some things from us about the Bureau of Asset Management, but we will first have these conversations with the Bureau and the Controller's Office. We are going to be asking for a very significant improvement in the Velocity computer program systems. Just a quick review for the trustees who are relatively new to our organization. When I was brought in, we were implementing CPMS system, which was basically bringing up to date a 40-year-old system that we used from Prudential, and Prudential was actually shutting off that system. CPMS went a little bit roughly. We didn't get all the functionality done. It went over budget, went over time, but it was implemented in 2017. One of the things we found out as we implemented CPMS is we got access to all the data on both the enrolled and the unenrolled. It is at that time that we began to identify the problem of the unenrolled, the significant number of DOE staffers who qualified for BERS membership but never joined. As we've discussed before, many of us view this as a moral obligation to make sure these folks understand their position. The fiscal 2019 budget, we requested headcount to address this and address some systematic problems we were having in delivering services to members. That headcount request was reduced by 50%, and we were only able to address the economic issues of our enrolled members. 2020, we asked for money for an outside contractor to begin to help us address this issue. And we did an RFP, secured our relationship with Siegel-Benz, and they are doing an initial project for us to begin reaching the unenrolled. But this is going to be a long-term project, reaching the unenrolled, which leads me to what we are going to ask for. Vitech has brought to our attention a new Velocity systems upgrade, which they call digital self-service. You're going to hear about this along with a campaign module. Ryan Persad, who's the project manager on Velocity, will be talking about this in the next few minutes. We are going to be asking for permission to acquire this software, implement it along with rollout with Velocity, which would be August 2021. This will significantly enhance our ability to, for a very long period of time, consistently reach and speak to the unenrolled staff members in the DOE. Just understand that just reaching out once is kind of useless. Any kind of reach out program like this is lucky to convert 5% of those targeted folks. This will need a consistent, long-term, overtime, repetitive outreach. And when we ask for this systems upgrade, you're gonna hear more details, but understand that we are running about $1.4 million under budget in the capital budget for Velocity. This is a result of us dismissing our third-party project managers and putting Ryan Persad in charge of project management. He and his team have been managing the project since January. They've done an excellent job. Rollout 1 is happening literally as we speak in October. They're right in the middle of finalizing all of this, and it's going to come in on time, under budget. So what we're going to be asking for, in addition to approval of this software improvement, we're going to be asking for permission to move $1.4 million of money we will not have to spend to the operating budget, and it'll be about $250,000 for this year. And that money will go to pay for the next 2.5 years of the digital self-service and campaign systems that we will implement with Velocity. And so to give you a little bit of perspective on that particular information, we used to pay Prudential $4 million a year for a system which was 40 years old, horrible, data corrupted. It was crap. And we pay them $4 million a year. I mean, we didn't know it until we had to disassemble it and replace it. So the expected run rate for our systems management and operations will be about $2 million a year. Now, that doesn't count about $4 million that we've already pre-budgeted for maintenance, which is basically implementing software, implementing improvements. Our OTPS run rate costs for Velocity after DSS and campaigns will be a little bit more than half of what we used to pay Pru, with remarkably improved functionality, unbelievably improved. Ryan will talk a little bit more about DSS and campaigns later, and we can provide the opportunity for people to see demonstrations. I can tell you that Sally Sandoval, who is in charge of our communications department, has reviewed it along with other team members of Velocity and internal communication staff, and they believe it will be a significant improvement in their efficiency and allow them to reach many of the unenrolled, which are currently not being spoken to. I think I've taken up enough of your time, and let's get back to the agenda, and thank you very much.
I'd like to acknowledge that Trustee Donald Nesbitt has also joined. Welcome, Donald.
Thank you.
John, you want me to take the lead now? That sounds
John, you're on
good.
mute. You're on mute, John.
Yes, you could take over. Ship's all yours.
No problem. Thanks. Sorry about that disconnection earlier. That was super weird. Just crashed on me. Okay. All right. Thanks, Sandy. So the next item on this afternoon's agenda are calendar items 2 through 17, the ordinary business of BERS. Is there a motion to consider calendar items 2 through 17?
Motion to consider items 2 through 17.
Second, Natalie.
Great. Thank you. Oh man, sorry. I'm not coming with my A game today, folks. I apologize. Alex, can you tell us about the ordinary business of BERS?
Certainly. The ordinary business of BERS is all the retirements, death benefits, and refunds that have been processed since the last meeting of this board.
Thanks, Alex. We'll now vote on these items. We're going to call out each trustee's name and indicate whether you are in favor, oppose, or abstain. Alex?
I think, Lindsay, we can do a voice vote here if you wanted to.
Right. So we'll do what we did at the top. All in favor, please say approve.
Approved.
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 I approve.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Okay. Vote carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda to be discussed in an attorney-client session. Is there a motion to exit public session and enter into attorney-client session?
I make the motion, Deb.
Thank you, Deb. Second.
Second, Isaac.
Thank you. Okay, let's vote. I will do that again. So all in favor, please say in favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great.
Okay.
Is there any folks who need to exit the meeting?
Okay, give me a few moments and I'll move those individuals to the lobby. Okay, hold.
I see that we are now recording. May I continue while she's adding folks?
Everyone's been added in, so you're good to go.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay. Next item on our agenda is calendar item 18, adoption of a definition of, we just discussed this in attorney-client session.
This is the vote.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
To adopt the rule. Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying. The next item on our agenda is calendar item 18, adoption of a definition of dependent parent for the administration of accidental death benefits. Can I have a motion to consider this, please?
Motion to consider.
Thank you. I heard Donald and Peter. All Alex already told us about this resolution. I think we will, unless there are any further questions, we will just pivot to a vote. Alex, do you need to describe this for the public record for the recording?
This is the adoption of a definition of the term dependent parent within the meaning of Retirement and Social Security Law, Section 601D, for the purposes of administration of accidental death benefits.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Alex. We will now vote on calendar item 18. All in favor of calendar item 18, please indicate your approval.
In favor?
In favor.
In favor.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, vote carries. The next item on our agenda is the Velocity Digital Self-Service presentation. May I have a motion to discuss?
Motion to discuss. Isaac. Second.
Isaac, second.
Natalie, second.
Thank you, Natalie. Ryan Prasad, BERS Project Manager Velocity, is here to give us a presentation. Please take it away.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Board of Trustees, for having me this afternoon. I'm going to share my screen. Okie dokie. So this is a presentation for an upgrade to the current Velocity project called the Digital Self-Service item. And the gist of it is that this is Vitek incorporating new technologies to make their product more adaptable and modular. And one of the biggest benefits that BERS can see from this, as Sandy mentioned earlier, is with our member outreach and enrollment initiatives. So first, what is DSS? DSS is Vitek's new Velocity digital service platform, which aims to bring member self-serve, member communications to the next level. There are separate portals for active members and retirees. There will be a feature called DSS Campaigns, which will allow BERS to use modern technology to communicate with our current membership and potential membership. There's a highly customizable user interface, which would allow BERS to change the look and feel of our member portals without the usual delays of outside development, so that saves time and money. BERS will also be able to make custom portals for different platforms that our members would view these sites on, such as PCs, tablets, and mobile devices. Also, the DSS platform supports Vitek's new Evergreen Development and Deployment model. The Evergreen Development and Deployment model allows BERS to receive new features, some of which are free of charge, by collaborating on a bi-weekly basis with other Vitek clients to determine which features and changes benefit the most clients, and then those changes are eventually deployed across the board. This deployment module is frequent and continuous, ensuring that our membership receives the latest technology at a lower cost and a quicker time frame than previous development methods. DSS member benefits. There will be what's called a natural language search. So the natural language search allows the member to search for queries like, when can I retire? As opposed to, and be directed to the appropriate filters and or information, as opposed to scouring through various menus to determine, to kind of find out, where things are located. As I stated earlier, there will be separate portals for active members and retirees, which makes sense since they need to view different types of information. For instance, active members can view their service and take a loan, while retirees can update their demographics and view their pension payments online. Campaigns will also allow us to continue, as stated earlier, our enrollment outreach efforts, which are started by the Siegel Group, as Sandy mentioned. We'll have the ability to send out blast emails, text messages, and/or surveys to get feedback from our existing membership, inform our membership of critical time-sensitive updates, and to reach new eligible members in order to inform them of the benefits BERS can provide them and their families by joining. Having the ability to do this through V3 will allow BERS to conduct these mass communications more frequently, which is currently limited to its capabilities and priorities. The ability to digitally automate these processes is crucial during a time like this, where in-person contact is limited, if not prohibited. And just a couple quick notes also for enrollment. The system will allow us to target, we have data in our system for members, for people that are not members, but we get information from the payroll files, and these are called Tier Plan 000 members because they're unenrolled. So now with the advent of this type of system where BERS can actually reach out manually, we'll be able to take the information that we get from these payroll files, whether they be phone numbers or emails or addresses, and contact them immediately, as opposed to going through a third-party vendor, which would take time and is obviously would cost more money. In addition, the members will be able to enroll online for their TDA, which will cut costs on postage and printing for TDA enrollment kits, which we send out every single year. Project timeline-wise, DSS Phase 1 will be incorporated if approved, it will be incorporated into the current Velocity Project Rollout 2 timeline. Active member DSS features will go live as of Rollout 2, which is in August 2021. All existing MSS functionality scheduled for Rollout 2 will be included. And DSS Phase 2 will be delivered in an additional quote-unquote Rollout 3, which is scheduled for 6 months after Rollout 2. And that will include the retiree DSS and campaigns, which we expect to go live as of February 2022, if approved. Now for the cost. If approved, BERS will be charged annual fees, the annual fees associated with the DSS costs, so hosting mostly, as opposed to upfront fees. So Sandy negotiated, because of the given, budget crises and COVID situation, Sandy negotiated some terms where we wouldn't have to incur any upfront costs if such a project was approved. And the following shows the total annual fees expected through FY23, which are DSS costs in addition to the current Velocity annual fees for these current years. And finally, let's see here. Yep. The payment proposal. As Sandy stated earlier, we have about $1.48 million in unused Velocity capital funds due to the departure of our previous project managers. And our expectation is to convert about close to $250,000 of those capital funds to be used as OTPS funds for fiscal year 21 to cover the hosting costs from now through June of 2021. And then we would reallocate the remaining unused capital funds, about $1.23 million, to be budgeted as OTPS funds to cover the fiscal year 22 and a portion of the fiscal year 23 DSS costs, if approved. And just before we get to the questions, I would just like to share some screenshots that were provided to me from Bitech. So this is a look at the DSS homepage if viewing it on a computer. Obviously, this is definitely a lot more advanced than we have now, and is even better than what we have signed up for the current V10 rollout. This is a new feature called the DSS Help Center, where BERS will be able to keep a repository of guides that will assist members for various BERS transactions and tasks. And you could search it as if it were like a Wikipedia, for instance. This is a screenshot of the new secure messages, which is very similar to Outlook, in my opinion, and I think that it's very the UX is very good and it's very user intuitive focused. And this is a screenshot of the DSS documents page. This is a screenshot of the Contact Us page. And this is a view of what our portal would look like if we go to DSS on a cell phone or a tablet. And we can also customize these views. It's not just a matter of the frames adjusting based on the screen size, but we can actually pick and choose what items to show because of the customizable UI on a tablet or a phone. This is an example of a retirement estimate. This is an example of a workflow request. So this would be something like where instead of having the member call in and say, hey, I need to update my date of birth, obviously this requires proof documents, they can initiate this process via DSS. And someone can contact them, a BERS employee can contact them afterwards to continue. And this is an example of the campaigns dashboard, which will help a lot with our outreach and enrollment initiatives. And we can create multiple campaigns. And as you can see here, this is just a brief look. We can identify the number of targets, the conversion rate, how many were contacted, how many we were unable to contact, and other metrics of the sort, which I'm sure not only would the executive leadership and BERS leadership be interested, but also the Board of Trustees. And this is just another view of how this information and these metrics can be viewed in a more user-friendly way. And that is that for me. So are there any questions with regards to the DSS proposal?
I have a question, Natalie. The functionality that you just presented is all new, nothing that would have ever been possible in the original VITEC Velocity project planning scope?
So the user interface that I showed you, which shows how the DSS portal looks for the members, a large portion of that is going to roll out with version 10, which is scheduled for a couple of weeks. But some of the items, like the natural language search that's built in to help members, and the repository of documents that are kind of serve as a BERS wiki, those are not available in the current product that we signed up for. In addition to the larger feature of the campaigns that we would use for enrollment and emergency contacts to our membership, as opposed to just putting something up on a banner or sending out letters.
I would add, Natalie, that the automatic sizing, depending on the tool you're using to access the website, is something that will allow us to avoid paying for the creation of a mobile app. And the communications capabilities in the system are really the magic sauce for us, in my opinion. It will take pressure off the need to get headcount to reach the unenrolled, and it'll also take pressure off the idea that we need a third-party contractor to help us do this.
Another key part,
That
Sandy,
was
to
my
add to
next
that
question.
is the evergreen feature of DSS that will be constantly updated with this product rather than now through VITEC and have to come back to the board. It's an evergreen system that always lives on to be updated with us and other VITEC clients that'll be new.
I appreciate that. The question of that third-party contract for the outreach that we were trying to do for new member recruitment, does that, I know we had a pretty detailed conversation about that last time. Does that work hasn't happened yet? Does that mean that we are going to not do that work? And just use this as the primary tool now?
No, that work has occurred. It's still ongoing. What has been done so far was they've helped us with, the email body content, design layout, website copy updates, application updates, postcard design. They helped us with stakeholder development, the 7 talking points for stakeholders, union leaders, chapter leaders, us HR directors. They developed video testimonies for scripts for Sandy and myself and other BERS employees. So all that has been ongoing over the summer. And what Ryan has mentioned earlier regarding issues we have with Do It, that right now we don't have control of our own outbound email. So Do It pushed back on us, getting us out to our members. They can support us at one time. So with campaigns, that allows much more flexibility and independence outside of the Do It process to reach our members and potential members. And it's not just the unenrolled members. It's for everything we would want to do actively. We've always been really reactive at BERS in history. We're trying to be more proactive. So we can do a campaign that, give me every member turning 50 in the next month, and each campaign to them to increase their TV contributions, or members that are hitting their 10 years if they're in tier 4, and so that they can get refunds of their amount of contribution. So these are things that can be ongoing proactively. It'll be a big difference in campaigns.
That's a great point, Daniel. The current membership, targeting the current membership, we can basically query any of the data that we have in our current system to use as demographics for targets.
Also, it's estimated that we would save about $250,000 a year in postage and printing with this functionality.
Okay, are there any other questions? It looks like no, so I just want to say thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for all your hard work on this really important system. Appreciate it. Okay. The next item on the agenda is calendar item 19, authorization to amend the member self-service capital budget and the fiscal year 2021 administrative budget for the Board of Education Retirement System. May I have a motion to consider this vote, please?
Motion, Isaac.
Thank you, Isaac. Second?
Janelle, second.
Thank you, Janelle. We're going to do what we've done before, so say, if all in favor, say favor, please. Remember to unmute yourself.
In favor.
In favor. Great.
Sorry.
Opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the vote carries. The next item on the agenda is calendar item 20, authorization to amend an agreement with Vitex Systems Sub LLC. May I have a motion to consider, please?
Michael, motion.
Thank you. I see Deb raise your hand. Thank you, Deb. Daniel, can you tell us about this resolution, please?
Sure. This just is a resolution to amend the current service and license agreement with Vitec to include DSS.
Are there any questions? Okay, great. Thank you, Daniel. We will now vote on this item. All in favor of calendar item 20, please indicate your approval now.
In favor?
Approved. In favor.
In favor.
Are there any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, thank you. The vote carries. The next item on the agenda is calendar item 21, authorization to the Comptroller of the City of New York to invest, sell, and exchange the funds of the retirement system. May I have a motion to consider, please?
Motion to consider, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Second?
Second, John.
Thanks, John. Antonio, can you please tell us about this resolution?
Absolutely. This is the quarterly authorization to the comptroller to invest funds on behalf of the Board of Education Retirement System. As Sandy mentioned, next quarter we will have some amendment to this resolution in the areas of investment strategy, risk management, financial reporting, and contracts. But today we are fine with the resolution as stands, so we're recommending approval.
Thank you, Antonio. Are there any questions from the board? Great. We will vote on the item. All in favor of calendar item 21, please indicate your approval now.
In favor.
Favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. The vote carries. The next agenda items are investment items that belong in executive session. Can I have a motion to enter executive session, please?
Deb.
Motion.
Second?
Tom, second.
Each one. All in favor of going into executive session, please indicate your approval now.
In
In
favor.
favor.
In
In
favor?
favor.
Any opposed?
Any
Any
abstentions?
any abstentions?
Okay, can I have a few moments to move those individuals out to the lobby? I'll let you know when I'm ready. Okay.
Thank you. We're turning the meeting off to the public now. And the report to the public.
We're ready to go. Recording has resumed and Sherry's back in the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. Alex, can you report out the board's actions in executive session, please?
During executive session, the board voted to approve calendar item 24, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the private equity portfolio. Calendar item 25, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the real assets portfolio. And calendar item 26, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the infrastructure portfolio. The board did not authorize calendar item 22, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the private equity portfolio. And the board voted to table calendar item 23, authorization of the controller to commit a portion of the real asset portfolio.
Thank you, Alex. The next item on the agenda is a presentation on ESG and corporate governance from Siegel Marco. Can I have a motion to discuss, please?
Motion to discuss.
Thank you, Tom. Second.
Peter, second.
Thank you, Peter. Take it away, Mr. Rice.
Okay, thank you. Well, let me share my screen here. Should be easier to share my screen. Whoops. Sorry about this. All right, can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, you're good.
Right, sorry for the delay there. So I consider this a presentation that's in the along the continuum that started you might remember probably a little over a year ago. Julia Zuckerman from Siegel Marco and Evelise and a couple other members from the strategy committee gave a presentation that started with kind of where the broad marketplace was at that point on environmental, social, governance kind of issues. We then had series of discussions and some presentations from BAM. You might remember Mercer came in with a presentation on carbon footprinting at some point along the process here. Most recently, the Makita presentation on fossil fuels and some of the scoring that goes on for looking at divestment issues around fossil fuels. And that's leading us to what do we want to do for the Board of Education retirement system, and particularly I think where we want to focus a little bit today on Siegel Marco as the investment advisor to the Board of Education. I wanted to give you some direct kind of commentary on how we're advising our clients, and I gave a little preview of this to the executive group last week, commenting that today we're going to talk about the Siegel Marco and the investment advisory portion of Siegel's business, but it's within a broader context of what our Siegel company does, and indeed a person that spearheads our proxy voting and corporate governance area, a woman named Maureen O'Brien, that will be presenting, I believe, in November to the full committee on Siegel's position and some of the proxy positions that our clients are taking. Certainly, we have a large public fund client base, a large multi-employer public base that retain us for proxy voting and for taking positions on issues. Most recently, the one that's got a lot of attention, not direct issue for us today, but the defined contribution plans and their ability to use ES&G funds. The current administration took a particularly narrow view on that. So let me go through some of these in a short presentation that Vanessa and I'll cover. We'll go through some of what we're advising clients now in terms of advice on things like climate change, things like proxy voting, and things like the fossil fuel divestment process that's on the table. And on page 2, or this page, first page here, I just want to hit some of these ideas. I go through that and think of these broad categories of governance ideas, research and manager kind of selection topics that we're covering when we do the searches that you hear about for the public security managers, and then finally the quantitative analysis and the performance and security level research that Siegel Marco does through our research department to try to get at some of the, I'll call them more soft topics. What our peers are doing, what's going on in the marketplace that might affect some of the quantitative data that we see when we make our assessment about scoring up things like fossil fuel kind of companies and what their level of reserves that's appropriate. And when we were looking at the carbon footprinting, I think we were all surprised at the carbon footprint of some of the manufacturing companies like Apple, for example, that had a huge transportation and supply line impact through their shipping of their products from around the world. So in terms of the overview, if I were to pick a couple things on this first page that we would emphasize, certainly engagement, that third bullet point down, engaging with the corporate boards on issues of corporate governance, whether it's at the money manager level, the broader and non-governmental organization and kind of Siegel corporate area. This idea of affecting corporate boards through governance and using the power of the shareholder, your share ownership as influencing. We've seen a lot of research around this idea that, and the question, it's really an open question from all the research I've read anyway, how much is the engaging with corporate boards and trying to engage as part of the effort to manage environmental, social, and governance kind of topics. How much is that affecting the performance of these companies? And let's just use an example that I'll probably refer to a couple of times in this presentation. Oil prices have collapsed because there's not as much travel and there's not as much energy consumption due to the virus and the slowdown of airlines and some of the pricing issues that have gone on with energy. That slowdown clearly has affected and resulted in very poor performance for energy companies generally. Well, that has made any funds that avoided energy companies look better. And how much of that was real corporate board kind of activity, and how much was just the collapse of the commodity price? At BERS, we actively took a step to divest from coal stocks. Now, it was an interesting step because at the time, almost all the coal companies were bankrupt and we didn't hold any anyway. But coal companies have continued to underperform. And that is a situation where it was the collapse of the commodity price more than it was certainly our divestment and most public entities' divestment, because it just wasn't that broad a holding of coal stocks in pension portfolios. So that engagement question is one that, when I talk about manager research in a few pages, when Vanessa looks through some of the things that we're doing right now in BERS searches, you'll hear a lot about our view. And we heard this from Clarity, the underlying, the kind of data analytic analysis firm that we have working with BERS on how much that engagement has really helped and how we score that engagement. And then for the last bullet point there, in terms of BERS, when we start to hone these topics toward BERS, what are the near-term issues? Well, the first is this climate change RFP that we have outstanding. We're going through the managers right now, Siegel submits a group of managers to the Bureau of Asset Management. We're going through the search process. We'll have a chance in real time and with real performance effects to see the costs and benefits of managing that portfolio. You heard one of our broad goals just earlier. We were talking in the private equity format there about having fewer higher impact managers. Well, this is a place where we're taking a really hard look at one group of managers to see what would the performance effect be given these kind of climate change and some of the effects that we're looking at from a governance perspective. And then finally, the fossil fuel project, just want to deal with this directly. I mean, we said this with regard to the coal investment. Siegel Marco said, and I said this with regard to the private prison investment, really have a high level of fiduciary concern when we put the trustees in the position of making security level decisions for the portfolio. And that's because it's very difficult from our analytic point of view to weigh the performance impacts on the fund versus the other criteria that are being weighed as part of the decision to make those divestment or those, not investment, those active investment decisions. And what we saw in the Makita report, for example, is that right now our fossil fuel exposure, for example, is about $137.8 million or 2% of assets. So while the performance impact hasn't been directly assessed, at that level of assets, we know it's not going to have a major performance impact on the portfolio on the one hand. On the other hand, our selling off $137.8 million worth of stocks is not going to have a major effect in any of those companies. There are plenty of buyers for those stocks, especially since most of our holdings are in index funds. I just want to put this out as the definitions that we look at specifically in each of the categories when we're evaluating, and this cuts across whether we're looking at an individual manager, whether Siegel Marco Research is evaluating, an individual manager is looking at the stocks, whether Siegel Marco is evaluating those managers, or when we hear from Maureen, what our broad-based proxy and voting effort looks at across the board. And really in the environmental category, the one that we've talked about the most has to do with the second point there, products and services that solve or in some cases are more harmful to environmental issues. Second issue around social, I mean, we certainly have issues, and the place, quite honestly, where we see social and probably governance the most right now across our client base is in the nonprofit. So especially the religious organizations we consult to. You can think the church organizations that take very strong positions on certain manufacturing policies in third world countries. You can think about hospitals that we advise that have bans on tobacco. Certainly the Catholic Church has a ban on a broad swath of healthcare companies that have exposure to abortifacients. And it would tell you that there are situations within both social and governance we have 5 to 10 years of both performance and engagement kind of factors to evaluate for those companies. And I'll tell you, it's largely, especially when take tobacco, it's been largely a mixed bag. Even as the major healthcare entities sold off their tobacco stocks, the tobacco industry consolidated, and the stocks have done remarkably well over the whole time period. So just putting these out as the definitions that we're thinking about and looking at manager research, and moving on to the specific advice that and kind of framing Siegel Marco's position. You see probably see some writing around the signatories to the Principle for Responsible Investing. We've listed the specific principles there. The two that I'd highlight out the most that you'll see at both our manager research level and then also in our broad proxy voting is that third one down, looking for disclosure on ESG issues. The more disclosure we get from our corporate and other security, private equity, real estate, the more disclosure we get from the kinds of managers that we have, the better kinds of decisions that we as your advisor are able to make in recommending those managers. And so really over the last year have had a kind of quantum leap in the kinds of data we collect on those issues, the scoring that we do for them, and then the impact that has on all our manager selection, whether it's a small cap U.S. equity manager or some broader fixed income manager, some broad kind of international or index kind of manager that we use. And then to the second to the last arrow point there, in terms of the way we're looking at searches for BERS, we'll see this more directly in a kind of specific case. We get to the climate change RFP, but we'll see a little bit about it when we talk about it. The next search coming up, which is a mid-cap opportunity, mid-cap U.S. equity kind of search. We are including our ESG scoring as part of our manager research recommendations in the write-ups that we present to the investment strategy group. We have those kind of discussions with both BAM and with the BERS strategy group, and then we don't have any particular off-the-shelf idea coming in, every one of those searches gets customized for the specific criteria that, in the case of BERS, we're working through right now to be able to define what kind of searches we want and what kind of managers we want in the portfolio. I'll transition here to some of the things that we want to talk specifically about with regard to managers, but I wanted to give the perspective that overall, if I look at our public fund client base and our Taft-Hartley client base, which I think have the most kind of proactive engagement on these issues, and I tell you, we have funds in both. I lived in Texas for a while. I mean, I tell you, the Texas public funds are kind of lined up aggressively against any kind of divestment. Certainly, energy is a huge part of their holdings. The idea that they would sell off their fossil fuel portfolios is kind of anathema to the what they view as the security of the beneficiaries for the Texas employee retirement system, for sure, and for almost all the endowment and foundations we deal with there. And that's why I would tell you that little red piece there over in the bottom left, that divestment idea continues to be the lowest percentage. And that divestment includes not only the idea of selling off stocks you have, but excluding stocks at various levels. So I've mentioned in the past, we've had research for BERS at both carbon footprinting as a way to kind of differentiate among stock holdings, and now most recently a fossil fuel kind of proven reserves criteria for screening those stocks. The biggest benefit, the biggest kind of impacts that we've seen are those two over on the right-hand side: the active ownership, or actively proxy voting, actually filing shareholder proposals based on the underlying securities and the underlying corporate kind of governance issues. And then ES&G integration, where we look at the specific managers that are that we're going through the search process, or that are in our portfolio, and how to adjust those manager search selections so they appropriately consider that, so we can make an affirmative statement that we're not just weighing performance or environmental, social, and governance kind of criteria when we make a manager selection. We're indeed having a broad, diverse, balanced approach to the manager selection. If I wanted to summarize those things down to kind of what we think is the appropriate course and the way that we've kind of targeted our actions and searches over the last year in the public security area for BERS, these are probably the four kind of core things that we at Siegel Marco have worked on. First has been kind of engagement, not divestment. We haven't had any recommendations around divestment, or haven't taken an active position on the Makita kind of scoring system for fossil fuel reserves. We think the climate change kind of RFP approach, where we're acting through a registered investment advisor. You heard Sandy refer to that idea of using registered investment advisors for kind of the disclosure and the process, competitive and best practice processes that they use, but also with the idea that going through that process provides that layer of fiduciary protection for you as trustees, for us as the general consultant to the fund. Again, we've generally advised against security level decisions by trustees, especially in the broad sector and broad sector and kind of industry level. And then finally, this active proxy voting, which we don't do for BERS, but I would tell you, and you'll hear from Maureen O'Brien in November, that she works actively with Michael Garland on a number of different initiatives to line up the kind of client base that Siegel Marco has with the major public funds in the U.S.
Hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but we have a hard stop at 6. Can you, if we can't finish the presentation now, we can revisit, but can you wrap it up? Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Vanessa, why don't we just go through these last two slides minute each on these two. And so again, I'm just taking those prior kind of points and saying these are the kind of things I think one of the open items that we're having the discussion with Antonio and his team is, do we put this in some kind of mission statement for the Board of Ed? Do we modify the investment policy statement as some kind of with an appendix that brings these up. But these are the same kind of topics that you heard Julia and Evelise talk about over a year ago, and that we've debated. We're getting more data on each of these kind of things, especially the ones around climate change, the ones around ESG integration into manager research. The other ones are real more proxy voting. And I'll just conclude with the some of the things that have come out of the recent regulatory kind of and administrative environment. We all know that this is subject to change based on what administration is in power in Washington. But the bias right now is against having standards that kind of incorporate ES&G, certainly on defined contribution plans. But they're pushing more on the financial and the performance kind of aspects of investments in terms of what plan trustees and advisors do for investing participant money, as opposed to prior administration, which leaned toward kind of a broader interpretation of taking into account all factors in making the decision. And then I'll conclude on that last point there. We know that we're using this environmental social governance topics as a tool of risk management. And we think that tool of risk management has to take into account all the things you saw on the prior page and balance off with proxy voting and shareholder engagement as the kind of initial step before you get to the point of divestment or exclusion. Done.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board for Michael? Any questions from the board?
I don't think we have time. My request, I guess, more than a question, is that we can take this up maybe in our next executive committee meeting, because there's a lot here. And we didn't have quorum in our last exec board meeting, so we weren't able to ask questions. So maybe we can revisit this.
Absolutely. We will put this on the agenda for the next executive committee meeting, October 13th.
Thank you.
Great. So any other questions, or we'll take it to the executive session?
Great.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, the final item on our agenda is noting the receipt of various reports from the Office of the Actuary. Can I have a motion to discuss, please? Thank you, Deb. Second?
Isaac, 2.
Thank you, Isaac. Carrie?
So happy Equinox, everybody. It's officially fall, and I'm sure a lot of you can't believe that today. But there were, I'll quickly go through the reports that I have. There's 3 reports that were issued from my office this past time, I guess past 2 months, because we haven't met since July. One of them I'm going to share with you is the actual valuation report. I know you guys had talked earlier about this website and some videos on it, but this is our website. It's www.nyc.gov/actuary. Will take you here. On the reports tab, there is the valuation report that was issued for BERS August 24th, I believe it was. I'm not going to go through this whole report, but if you scroll through, there's an executive summary, and it tells you stuff like the asset value and the liability value, the unfunded ratio, and all that. So it's really good information. If you guys read through, having any questions, you can let me know. The other report that was issued was the GASB 7475 report, issued on September 11th. This report is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board accounting report, accounting disclosure for the city's OPEB plan. Again, I'm not going to go through everything, but I just wanted to point out in the executive summary, it can tell you the liability and the asset value, and the funded ratio is so low because this is a pay-as-you-go plan. And I know that you guys were talking about the documentary, the video earlier. So if you goes on the news section, just FYI, you scroll down to February 2020. This is the mini documentary that was mentioned. The other, so let me stop sharing for a second. The third report is a fiscal note report. And you guys should see the fiscal note report in front of you. There's 4 fiscal notes issued in the last 2 months. They all surround the early retirement incentive. And if you recall, July was a long time ago. So to recap, they're the same variations of the same basically program. And the program, if you recall, it has 2 parts to it, a part A and a part B. Part A would be giving people an extra month of pension service for each year that they worked up to 36 months. So up to 3 years can be added to their pension formula. That's part A. And part B would be for those that retire early. There currently is a reduction factor that's placed on your benefit formula so that you don't get 100% of your formula, you get a fraction of it. Part B would be eliminating that early retirement factor. So that's the incentive program. You can only qualify for one of the parts. That was the original variation. So on 58, fiscal note 58 on the top right here, that you see, that was a variation of it so that it was only offering part B, which is removing the early retirement reduction factor. And that worked out to be $23,400 per person who elects it on a contribution basis. The second fiscal note was both part A and part B. The only difference between this one and the original variation was that this one removed the date of membership requirement so that you did not have to be a member as of January 1st, 2010. So basically it means it includes tier 6. Tier 6 would be eligible if they meet the criteria for this ERI program. That worked out to be $12,000 for the part A and $30,300 for part B per person on a contribution basis again. The third fiscal note is the same as 59, as the one just described. The only difference was the underlying legislation that was attached to it included a state fiscal note. So all the language, therefore all the pricing was the same. And then the last fiscal note, again, also an ERI, it was a city-only version of the bill. So out of BERS obligors, for example, only those who are city employees would be eligible for it. So for example, school construction authority would not be eligible for it. And even though a majority of BERS members are city employees, there was about a 2% drop in headcount. But because those people because the city employees that were left that were considered in this fiscal note are mainly part-timers, it dropped the cost. So it was actually a 4 to 7% drop in cost, even though the headcount was only about 2% drop in cost. So you'll see it right here. It's $11,400 per person for part A and $29,000 per person for part B. Again, these are additional contribution numbers. I'm going to stop sharing and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Sherry? Okay, great. Thank you, Sherry. Appreciate it. Okay, that concludes the agenda for this meeting. The next meeting of the BERS Board of Trustees is scheduled for Wednesday, October 28th. Details will follow. Sandy, I believe we are committed to doing virtual meetings at the time being and in the future, correct? Just want to reiterate that point.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I just want to just say for my part, I tried to disconnect this from our panel meetings now that we are doing this virtually, also given the length of the panel meetings. So hopefully we will continue to make sure that those are not connected.
That is absolutely our objective. Have them separate.
Thank you, Sandy, and I appreciate you taking that request and for living up to it. Obviously, that makes it a lot easier for those of us who have to attend both meetings. So appreciate that. That said, can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
Motion, John.
Second,
John.
Natalie.
Thank you, Natalie. All right, all in favor of adjourning the meeting, please indicate your approval now.
In favor.
Favor.
Any opposed? Any abstentions.
I would expect it more joyful in favors from all of you. Very much.
Excellent. I wasn't sure we would get through this whole agenda in 2 hours, so I just want to commend the board admin staff. Thank you very much. That was great. Really appreciate it, and have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Everybody, stay safe.
Everyone, stay safe.
Good night.